Hey there, everybody. Here's the Chapter 3 lecture on nonverbal comm. This is one of my favorite chapters in the textbook just because it opens our eyes to a lot of things that we probably don't think about on a regular basis. We do take nonverbal communication for granted because it's a part of our perception, it's part of our culture, and it's something we use a lot, but we don't know that we're using. So it's pretty self-explanatory. Verbal communication is anything that's spoken or written. Nonverbal communication is everything else. So it's any message that you receive that is not written or spoken. And experts debate about this, but some people in the field will say that nonverbal communication is anywhere from 75 to 90% of our overall communication, which seems like a lot, but there's a lot of stuff going on simultaneously that we can read that has nothing to do with words, either spoken or written. And so I think in the notes are about 6 categories that I give for nonverbal communication. And these are varied and interesting. I think nonverbal comm is really cool. Once your eyes are open to it, you'll start kind of paying attention to these things in everyday life. The first category of nonverbal communication is body movement, and this includes all sorts of stuff. It might be eye contact, it might be posture, it might be facial expressions, it's your eye movement. It's anything you do physically that involves movement of the face or body minus talking. These are varied from culture to culture. Some cultures are highly invested in the idea of eye contact. In some cultures, it's very rude. But we learn a lot about what people do with their bodies, and it gives us a good idea of their attitude and their tendencies toward communication. So, for instance, if I came to class in a real classroom and I was going to give you a lecture on something, but I was all slouched over and pouty looking, you'd be able to tell by the way my face looked and my body posture that I was probably either not invested or I was upset about something. I mean, people usually don't have to say anything for us to know that they're upset or mad or whatever the case may be. So we do use this a lot as a way to interpret what people are thinking and believing before we even begin a conversation. It's interesting to note that the only commonality in this category, body movement, is facial expression. Across all cultures, a smile is a smile and a frown is a frown, and they all mean the same thing. And that's probably the only commonality that cultures have. Not that some cultures don't have commonalities, but the only one that's completely common across all cultures worldwide is facial expressions. So there's a really great study they did with small kids where they gave them pictures, flashcards with people's faces on it, and they were making facial expressions, and the emotions associated with those are common across culture. But as far as eye contact and eye movement and body language, those are very different, and they tell us a lot about what someone's feeling and thinking. The next one is physical appearance, and this has to do with the clothing you wear, your grooming. So for instance, if I'm wearing a business suit, it gives a different impression than if I'm wearing sweatpants. Also, if I'm clean or if I'm dirty or what my hair looks like, if I'm covered in tattoos, if I have a nose ring, all these things give us a certain impression. And right or wrong, we do make discretionary calls based on these things that we see. So, you know, if someone gets judged for having a tattoo on their face or a nose ring or something like that, it gives a certain image or impression, and they might be completely wrong, but they still give an impression. And I think that's why dress codes and things like that exist, is because we know that our physical appearance conveys a lot about what it is we believe and think and feel. The third one is voice quality. The volume at which you speak, the rate at which you speak, the pitch, tone, your accent, all of those convey information. So it seems like that would be verbal communication, but the verbal communication is the words you're saying. The nonverbal is the quality of how you say it. So speaking quickly might convey nervousness, speaking loudly might convey anger, your pitch and your tone might be dependent on the group of people you're talking to. So for instance, we speak differently when we're speaking to a baby. I speak differently to my 9-month-old son than I do to my grandmother, so that, you know, voice quality has something to do with that. Time is the fourth quality, or the fourth nonverbal communication aspect. Cultures view time differently. As Americans, we're hyper punctual. We feel like if you don't show up on time, you've communicated something. Either you don't value the thing you're showing up to, or you're irresponsible, or any number of things. But we view it as an aspect of power. If I tell you to show up at 8 o'clock and you don't, it's because you don't respect me or the thing that I'm about to do. Where in other cultures, if you show up right at 8, that's rude. You should probably show up like at 8:15 or 8:30. So time is more fluid in other cultures. In our culture, I think it's a byproduct of our busyness and our lifestyle and the pace at which we live. We love time. Everything is very time-based. Like, for instance, we have deadlines for this class. We have deadlines for our meetings. We have deadlines for work. So time communicates. The way you value time communicates something about the way you feel. We feel like people who abide by deadlines are better people in the American culture, and that's not always true in other places. Touch is the fifth one. The fifth aspect of nonverbal touch is also associated with power. And touch is also context-based. For instance, there's a great study they talk about in your book where they measured a conversation between friends. They touched each other, several hundred times in an hour or over the course of the conversation. And Americans, it was like we touch each other twice. Americans are not a touch-heavy culture. We think it's weird or creepy when people break into our personal bubble or touch us during conversation. But we do know that people of power will touch people who are less powerful. So your boss might touch you in conversation where you would probably not reach out and touch your boss back. Other cultures, men hold hands, they kiss on the cheek, and as Americans, we think that that's, kind of strange or breaking some sort of social norm. So the way that we touch, not only does it say a lot about our cultural beliefs, but it also says a lot about the relationship that we're in. And usually, like I said, touch goes downward. Powerful people will touch not powerful people. And this, of course, doesn't apply really to families, but within the workplace. And then the last one, number 6, is space. Personal space and speaking distance will convey a lot about relationship, kind of like touch will. The amount of space you give someone will depend on the context of the relationship. I will get closer to my wife when I talk to her than I will to my boss, than I will to my students, and so on. And in other cultures, this is extremely different. I mean, we see that people in European and Asian cultures do this extremely differently, and where one is considered rude in one culture, it's completely different in another. So it's completely culturally and contextually based, but we learn about 90% of our information through nonverbal cues. How does someone look? How do they move? How do they observe time? How do they observe touch? What is their voice quality? And how do they observe space? So the vast majority of all communication is nonverbal. There's even a nonverbal component to verbal and written communication. So, for instance, if you send me an email and it's very short, full of grammatical errors, there's no capitalization or punctuation, I'm going to assume something about you that may or may not be correct based on the way you write. So your message aside, whatever it was you want to communicate to me, that aside, what I'm going to look at is the nonverbal part, your capitalization, spelling, grammar. I'm going to say, well, this person might not be intelligent, or this person might not be conscientious, or this person might not be a good worker because of the way their email looks, not because of what it says. And this also goes the other way. If your email is lengthy and full of big words and it's got headings and it's well organized and it's very formal, I'm going to assume, well, this person's got it together. And these sound like really snarky judgments to make, but right, wrong, or indifferent, we do make judgments based on the way things look more often than the way they sound or the message they communicate. So nonverbal communication is a huge aspect of everything that we do. Even in an online class, I feel like I know a lot about you based on how you write and format your emails and things, and I make judgment calls all the time. So that's nonverbal communication. That's the most important part of that chapter, and it's a very important part of our workplace lives. Other stuff covered in the chapter are good listening skills, and I mean those are extremely important in business as they are in every job, in every relationship, whether it's personal, private, business, whatever it is. But I mean, we know how to do this. We pay attention, we're open-minded, we're active, we paraphrase both internally and externally, and that's in the notes. We try not to interrupt, and we're really, really bad at this as Americans. We don't really listen as much as we wait to talk, and so we kind of miss some things as listeners, and I know I do personally. I miss some things as a listener because I'm internalizing what they're saying, coming up with my response, and so, taking notes, doing those things make you a good listener, or at least internally taking notes. Other things covered in the chapter, effectively using social media, which we discussed week 1 during some of those discussion boards. One of the things that I want you to think about specifically with social media and technology is I've been hearing a lot lately that people hate to call and get an automated message, or they hate to have to handle every claim online now or through social media. And so how, as a business leader or a company person, can you balance personalized service and cost effectiveness with technology? People say, I hate to handle everything online. I'm not technologically savvy. So how can you balance that in a world that's going all tech with personalized service and with using social media conscientiously and ethically and with common sense? So I want you to kind of think about that this week during discussions. And Another aspect of this chapter that kind of goes back to my previous lecture is working with a group and engaging in business meetings. And if you have a job, you probably have meetings. I've never had a job where I didn't have meetings, and they all are terrible for the most part, and you never want to go, and they always kind of interrupt what you've got going. But they're a part of the workplace culture nowadays, and they might be once a week, once a day, once a month. I have like 7 meetings every 5 days, and I get really sick of going, and I feel like a lot of them are pointless because they're not handled correctly. So a lot of times we find ourselves sitting in meetings, but eventually we might find ourselves running a meeting, and we want to be better than the people who ran the meetings for us. We want to be more engaging and more to the point. So you have to think about, like, should this be an online meeting, should this be an email, or should I call everybody in and really talk at them for an hour? So for instance, I gave an example in the notes that where I work, we had a meeting where they called us all in, we watched a 40-minute video, and then they dismissed us, and I said, well, why didn't you just send me a link to the video? So you really have to be kind of conscientious and thinking about other people's time and how you want to handle a meeting. But there are 5 types of meetings: face-to-face meetings, virtual meetings like Skype, FaceTime, iChat, stuff like that, conference calls, which are terrible, online meetings, which are much better because you can see someone's face, like you can see mine right now, and then written correspondence. It doesn't seem like a meeting, but a group email is still kind of a meeting. But when planning your meeting, have a purpose. There's nothing that will make your meeting goers angrier than you not knowing what it is you're trying to accomplish. So say your thing that you want to accomplish up front. I do this when I teach. The point of today's class, the reason I called you all here today is because I want you to know this thing when you go. People want to know the thing that they're supposed to take away. Pass out an agenda or put it up on a smartboard or projector and have times on it. People want to know how long they're going to be there, how long you're going to take, and they want you to stick to it. Time is valuable, and people hate to have their time wasted. Only invite the necessary people to your meetings. Don't call everybody that you know in on the meeting if they have nothing to do with it. While many hands make light work, a lot of people just get bored and distracted, and they end up sending Snapchats to their friends and making fun of you in text messages as opposed to being engaged in the meeting. Never wing a meeting. I've tried this before. I wing some of these lectures. Not wing, but like do them off the top of your head. Terrible idea. I've started taking better notes when I run meetings, and if you have notes and agenda and you have some things you want to talk about, they turn out a lot better. The lectures I wing on this iPad I delete because they just sound terrible and they're disorganized, and people hate that stuff. So prepare thoroughly. Your preparation will lead to more engagement. People will say, well, this person, it's nonverbal. They'll say, this person feels like they have their stuff together, and I believe them. Communicate with your members about what they will need to bring before meetings, things like that. You want your meeting to run smoothly and efficiently, and you don't want people to go away angry because you're not going to achieve your goal. Goal going back to your group communication lecture from the last chapter. So I guess the way that these chapters are linked together is that nonverbal communication plays a big role in your ability to be part of a group and to run a meeting and do these things. So you have to remember that the thing that you're saying is only 10% of what people are hearing. What they're hearing is all sorts of other stuff. If you show up, like I said, to the meeting and at your business and you're wearing sweatpants and you're not wearing makeup and you didn't brush your teeth and you're scattered all over the place and you have no agenda and you mumble over your words, all of that says more than the brilliant message you delivered. So we have to be very conscientious, and this is nerve-wracking. I mean, you kind of have to have all your bases covered. Do I look the part? Do I speak articulately? Am I speaking too quickly, too slowly? Do I observe space and touch properly? Am I offending people? Am I using the wrong euphemisms? Is my use of time equitable and fair? And is it what people are expecting me based on context and culture? And is my body movement proper? Am I slouching? Am I making enough eye contact? All those things are really, really important and need to be considered. I don't want to stress you out unnecessarily, and I think we all think about these things anyway because we worry about the way people view us. But it's an important chapter, and there's some really cool things in there that I never really even thought about until I started to think about them deeply. I start to think about I wonder what people think about these video lectures, and I wonder what people think about the way I dress at work and the way I view their time and run meetings. So just something to think about, and maybe you'll think about these things when you're in your next meeting at work, and you'll say, hey, this person didn't plan, they should take English 3200 or something like that. So here's the lecture, Chapter 3. 2 and 3 are the only chapters we're covering this week. Check out the discussion boards, check out the quizzes, and use the lectures to your advantage. If there's something in here you don't understand, go to the chapter outlines, review the textbook, shoot me an email, and I will see you then.